Shalom Israel first. Only war, praise the Lord, honor to Yahweh by Shemi outside, by Shem Kakadash, the Barnes T Pops, Elsgray Millstone. Peace, citation to 1/3 of Israel. For this lesson, one title it, Resisting Pleasures. Alright, and really just going into not being too engulfed with pleasures. Alright, because this flesh, it can never be satisfied. Alright, so really you just chasing dopamine upon dopamine, and just really an endless cycle, and it's unfulfilling. All right, and really, uh we want to we want to resort back to the spirit, and less, you know you know on vices, to give us comfort. All right, and let me just read Sirach 19. Point is in the 5th verse, and hopefully this is well said and edifying. But this is Sirach 19:1. A laboring man that is given to drunkenness shall not be rich. All right, so a laboring man that is always drunk will not be rich. Why? Because one thing costs money. It ain't cheap to drink all the time. All right, and you can miss out on opportunities, you know, because you always trying to feel good. Say, um, say you got a hangover or something. You got a hangover, and the next day, you calling to work. Just a little example, but you could be missing out on work. That could be very beneficial for you. All right, and reading on down, it says, "And he that contemns small things shall fall little by little." All right, and it's ultimately the small things that matter. All right, that's why the scripture says, "Examine thyself, whether thou be in the faith." All right, and really examining ourselves is, what are we giving our time onto? All right, and this really came, just obviously through the spirit, this video, but I was meditating about, really just dialing in, instead of always trying to chase, a feel good all the time, and just bullshit. It's time to kick it in gears. All right, because I'm watching a video by brother Bakar Moth in New York, and the video is talking about not everyone will make it to the in the transition, roughly paraphrasing. All right, and he made a good point. He said the Lord's about to turn this thing up. All right, and if you if you ain't ready to be, if you ain't ready to elevate, then ultimately, you're not gonna make it. All right, so really, it's the time to grow. Scripture says, grow in the grace. All right, so that's what you want to do. All right, looking at the apostles and elders, certain things they cut off. They used to do certain things, like, for example, a diet, right? They say you should eat, pizzas and carbs and all that bullshit. But now they don't, right? So that's an elevating process, all right? And we want to take heed to that, and implement that into our walk, all right? Especially if they tell you to do it, all right? Because they've experienced it, and they know um, the benefits of it, all right? But Salakia, if I'm being long-winded, but this is second verse, Sirach 19:2. Wine and woman will make men of understanding to fall away, and he that cleaveth to harlots will become impudent. All right, so wine and woman will make men of understanding to fall away, and there's nothing wrong with these things, but if you're overconsumed in them, if you always chasing it, these things can ultimately throw you off course, all right? Because one, you chasing the wrong thing, and and it ultimately, just a little quick side note, it's a blessing, when you don't get these things. Like, for example, woman, you know, um, the Lord, he'll put you on a dry spell because he's dealing, not because of how you look per se, or they just not messing with you. Really, the Lord don't want these women, in your walk, because these things can be an exit ticket out the truth. All right, so we gotta that's some food for thought, and actually understand that. All right, because um, this flesh always wants to feel good, and we weren't here to feel good. All right, we in captivity and we on a mission. All right, we here to teach the truth, wake our people up. The elect, Lord willing, part of the elect, and get the hell out. Get the hell out of here. All right, Micah 2:10. Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest. All right, for it is polluted; it shall destroy ye, even with the sword of destruction. All right, so these things, nothing wrong with these things, but um, over consuming yourself in these things can be your can be your downfall. All right, but skipping down to the 5th verse, it says, "Whoso taketh pleasure in wickedness shall be condemned, but he that resisteth pleasures crowneth his life." All right, so and it's a constant battle, fighting against the flesh and the spirit. The flesh always wants to feel good, and that's when the spirit kicks in, and you gotta win these battles. All right, you're gonna lose from time to time, all right, because we're not perfect, but ultimately, I saw this one thing on Instagram. It says, there's 7 days in a week, you know, or there's 7 games. You got to at least win 4 of those mugs, to win the series, something like that. All right, but just really, pushing that out there to continue to fight, and to continue to overcome. Salakia. All right, you know, there may be certain things, you have to cut off. All right, that's why Yahweh Shai said, um, this is Matthew 5:30. It says, "Thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body shall be cast into hell." All right, let me read this. Let me put this in the chat. All right, it says, I'll just type in GMS doctrine. Let's see what there you go. It says GMS generally interprets Gospel Matthew 5:30 as a warning to completely cut off anything that leads an Israelite man into sin, especially lust, wine and women, adultery, worldly behavior, or actions they believe separate someone from serving the Most High. All right, and Scripture says, as Apostle Paul said, all things are lawful but not expedient. All right, so it's really just time. We're in the time of trimming the fat. All right, you know, going out all the time, and which just there's as I just quoted, all things are lawful but not expedient. But we're coming into some evil times. All right, so you don't want to be overly dependent on these things. It says in the teaching they usually emphasize that the right hand is symbolic, not literal. Yahweh Shai was speaking with extreme seriousness, and a man should remove sinful influences from his life without hesitation. All right, JMS often applies it to sexual immorality, corrupt entertainment / media, ungodly relationships, habits tied to the world. All right, Yahweh Shai said, or Yahweh Basham Shai, talks about be ye separate, so come out of this world, so these are things, these pleasures in this life, these are worldly things. All right, it's all really, carnal. Scriptures also say, to be carnally minded is enmity with the Most High. All right, so it's time to, level up, and resort to the Spirit. It says, or anything they see as weakening spiritual discipline. They also connect it to the idea of mortifying the flesh, denying fleshly desires to stay spiritually focused. Man, that's heavy. Call all your blessed man outside. Let's get that. Mortify. This is Romans 8:13. It says, sorry, 12. It says, says, therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live after the flesh. All right. And the flesh always wants to feel good, that dopamine. All right. It says, for if you live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. So look at that word mortify. It says to kill, destroy the life of. All right. Put to death, cause death, make dead. All right. So ultimately, that's part of resisting pleasures. Resisting pleasures, you killing, that overly lustful spirit of the flesh. Scripture says, deny yourself. This is part of the walk. To suffer. All right. Of course, you don't feel good, but at the end of the day, it's beneficial for you. All right. And these things really, they really put you in the spot you need to be at. All right. And a quick point, right now, the spirit of dieting is out there. I'll be on YouTube too, and I'll see people talking about diet, and it's easy, it's convenient to get bullshit, eat carbs, blah blah blah, but that shit makes you feel like shit. I had some spaghetti last night. I feel like shit, tired, just all mopey and shit. Like, nah, and that's really what's motivating me to do this video is, really just getting my shit in order. All right. The spirit's out there, so take heed to it. All right. Beginning with the elders, apostles, great Millstone on down, and bros. Basically, just pushing that, elevating spirit. All right, but let me go to Ecclesiastes. Let me get this right here. Pleasures. All right, this is Luke 8:14. It says, and that which fell among the thorns are they, which when they have heard, go forth and are choked with cares and riches and pleasures of this life, and bring no fruit to perfection. All right, so when you engulfed in these things, you bring forth no fruit because, one, you're not in the spirit of, ultimately you're not in the spirit. When you're not in the spirit, you're not concerned with spiritual things. You're not concerned with, all right, what do I got to do? You just concerned with, the next feel good moment. All right, and then boom, time passes. He that can tell the small things so far little by little. These things accumulate, and then you want to go back in the world because apparently you see, this world is good. Like, nah, this ain't shit in this world. All right, it's just it ain't shit good in this world. All right. But let me go to Ecclesiastes 7:2. It says, it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. All right. It says, sorrow is better than laughter, sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. All right. Because when you sorrowful, it says by sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better, the mind. You have time to reflect. You have time to meditate. What you got to do, and how to maneuver ultimately through the spirit. But when you enjoying yourself, all the time, and just being in pleasure all the time, you're not thinking of things to better yourself on. You're thinking about, oh man, I feel good. All right, I can't wait for the next. I can't wait to do this. Tomorrow or some shit. And then boom, time goes on, and things you could have done, you didn't do because you was getting drunk or just having fun all the time. All right, and we come into some times where you're not gonna be in a fun spirit all the time. Because we come into some ugly times. Ezra says, woe is me, who shall deliver me in those days. He wasn't in a, oh man, that's gonna be a funny time. Like, this is dead serious. All right, we trying to make it. All right. It says, and that's why give diligence to make that calling and election sure. All right. It says, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. All right. House of fools is in the house of mirth. Look at these people. Just look at where they're occupied at. Scripture comes to mind is folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom. I think that's in the same chapter. No, never mind. Proverbs 15:21, folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom, but a man of understanding walketh uprightly. All right, so folly is joy to him, and folly, we in Babylon, everything, a lot of folly here. All right, and these things are enjoyable to these people because they don't know nothing. All right, but we have understanding of this truth. We have understanding of what we got to do, so on and so forth. So fuck yeah, but we have, we have understanding of the truth. So these the folly, it shouldn't phase us. And just look at just okay, cool, all right. But our mind should always be geared to this truth and becoming better. All right. But let me go to 2 Timothy 2 and 3. It says NOT. It says endure suffering along with me as a good soldier of Yahushua Mashiach. Soldiers don't get tied up in the affairs of civilian life, but then they cannot please the officer who enlisted them. All right, and we have a higher calling, So with much power is given with much power is given great responsibilities, and part of that responsibilities is keeping ourselves in check and not being over engulfed, in the pleasures. All right, now it's a balance, but really, just cutting down on these pleasures and resorting more back to the spirit, all right? That's why Yahushua said, remember thy first love, all right? So we gotta, and like I said, this video goes, for me first and foremost, but, hopefully it's well said and edifying. But let me go to 1 Corinthians 9:24, and then I'll end it off on here. It says, know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize, so run that ye may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. Let me get this in there. I'll read this in NLT. It says, don't you realize, 24th verse, don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All right. It says all athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. All right. And actually putting that, in your mind, you realize that, the quote unquote pleasures, you can't you can't weigh it in a balance, the pleasure of this life, golly, I can't speak right now. Let me get that right quick. Well, Moses, for example. This is Hebrews 11:25, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of the Most High than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. All right, and that's what we resisting, the pleasures of sin for a season. All right, going, just being worldly, living your best life here. That shit's for a season. Shit better turn up. Then once it's just all said and done, now what? Now you gotta deal with reality, all right? And but that don't equate to what the Lord's about to give his men, the elect. Psalm 16:11, that will show me the path to life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. So the Lord, he gonna give us all these things, but we just gotta wait, all right? It says so I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. All right. It says, I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. All right. We don't want that. We don't want to, put our hand to the plow and not finish. All right. So, like I said, this goes for me first and foremost. But hopefully this is well said and edifying. Really just, we in the time of locking in. Trimming fat. So, lastly, I want to give all praise and honor to Yahweh Bashman.